You're preparing your presentation for a big scientific conference or important meeting. You're excited. This is a major opportunity to talk about your research in front of a group of colleagues and senior scientists important to your career. And you're also feeling anxious. How can you make your talk engaging and memorable while clearly reporting on the results? Hey there, it's Mark Bayer, and you are tuned to When Science Speaks. In this episode, we're going to explore how to prepare for and deliver high-stakes presentations with Dr. Tae Seok, who's also going to talk about communication both in oral formats and written formats, his own communication journey. Moon is a full professor at the J. Craig Venter Institute, as well as executive editor of several prominent scientific journals. And Moon also is founding chair of the Synthetic Biology Young Speaker Series, which provides a weekly virtual and multi-year forum where a global thought leader gives an opening 5-minute talk, which is then followed by a 45-minute Rising Stars talk for more than 1,000 attendees around the world. So let's dig in. Welcome to the show, Moon. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's my great honor to be here.
Before we talk about science communication and the speaker series, I'd like to ask you about the focus of your research and your work at the Venter Institute. So, what can you tell listeners about what you're focused on right now?
Sure, I aim to solve global problems such as agricultural, environmental, and manufacturing and health problems through engineering biology, or people know that field as synthetic biology. I use mostly microbes, or now I'm moving into the mammalian cell to basically engineer those living system or living cell that potentially, increase the agricultural yield, crop yield, and then potentially solve the environmental problem, including climate crisis or pollution, and at the same time use the microbes to produce some high value chemicals or materials, at the same time use those kind of microbiota engineering or probiotic engineering, potentially cure cancer or some bowel disease, etc. And that's what I'm doing at the JCVI Institute right now.
Wow. It's fascinating and also so high impact. And thank you, first of all, for you and your
Thank
team for
you.
working on this. As I mentioned in the introduction, you're also the founding chair of the Synthetic Biology Young Speaker Series, or SYNBYSS, and SYNBYSS. And so I'm going to ask you in a second a little bit more about that acronym because we had a chance to talk offline how you came up with that and the really intriguing and meaningful meaning that has. But before we get to that, maybe just give our listeners a sense of what led you to start the series. And of course, we're going to have you link to the in the show notes on how listeners can tune in and find out more. But maybe just begin by telling us what led you to start the series and what are your goals through the series. Any sort of stories that stick out as far as young researchers as they've been delivering their work, things that will really help listeners get an understanding of what SYNBYSS is all about.
Sure. I was inspired by one program that actually started, I think, 2011 by the University of Washington in Seattle. They actually postdoc or senior graduate student to the department during summer to give seminar. This is format of faculty interview, but without hiring component. And they started grade one, and I was actually the first seminar speaker to be there. And I enjoy all the free meal and free hotel and free airplane ticket. And then also meet a lot of great people, including professors, students, those people. And then I was so impressed because typically seminar series, we invite professor, very famous professor to the department, but this is a complete different one. I would say the innovation and because this is nurturing young future leaders. And then I was honored to be there. And then thinking about that seminar series, I wanted to do it, but I kind of not that big guy. And then I wanted to do it when I become big guy.
Mm.
But as you can imagine or remember, 2020, we had major global issue that is a pandemic.
Mhm.
And then at the time, I also suffer, but not because of the pandemic, but because of my own medical issue. Many years of medical issue. I literally dying for 3.5 years minimum. And then I miraculously recover in 2021 January. And then when I recover, I become very thankful to many different things. But at the same time, I realized there are too many people out there suffering from this kind of pandemic issue, but especially that issue more severe for the young researchers,
Mm.
because they typically go to seminar series or the seminar or the conference to present their work, but those opportunities just gone. And then one problem was, as I mentioned, I was so sick for many years. I typically declined all the talk invitation,
Mm.
but I start to accept talk invitation, but mostly the virtual conference. And then I found one problem in that virtual conference that is basically most of the speaker is big names,
Mm.
dominantly white male,
Mhm.
not many female speakers, and then not many young speakers, except people like me, just mid-career, I would say.
Mhm.
So I want to change that culture. And then at the time, I was not big guy. I'm talking about 2021,
Mhm.
but I need to do it because those people need seminar before they become tenure professor
Mm.
or before they going into the job market. So I started a seminar series basically to help young researchers. Um, and then I asked my colleagues to nominate. And then I just thought it's gonna be only one semester seminar series because I hope, pandemic over by end of 2021,
Mhm.
but I got overwhelming number of nomination.
Uh-huh.
The nomination is so amazing because the first day I sent the email to my colleague, I literally forgot when I came back to my, computer in the afternoon, I got more than 30 emails. And then I open all of that. The CV is pretty much fantastic.
Uh,
If I compare and then compete with those people for the faculty job, I'm not gonna get my faculty position. Never. So I overwhelmed by that one, and then but it continue, and then I realized I need to continue for many years, and then now I'm doing more than 3.5 years by now.
Wonderful. So cool. Thanks for that background. And the other piece of the background was that I wanted to raise is the name. So we're talking Synthetic Biology Young Speaker Series. So that's SBYSS.
Mhm.
And the acronym that you call it is SYN, SYN, and then BIS, BYSS. And we were talking offline a little bit, and I asked you about the acronym, and you told a little bit of background. So maybe you could share that with everyone.
Sure. When I create that series name, that is Synthetic Biology Young Speaker Series, SYNBYSS, I call it SYNBYSS because I also wanted to remember my origin. I'm Korean. I'm still Korean. And then SYNBI in Korea means the miracle.
Mm.
And then I put S, two S actually. That means the multiple miracles. That kind of aligned with my experience. I literally miraculously recover and then or survive because 2020, I literally thought this is my last year in this world because I stopped visiting many specialists I'm meeting. I mean, I'm talking about medical doctors
Hmm.
because I didn't want to die because of COVID. So that's why I didn't go to the clinics because I worry about being infected. And at that time, I didn't care much about COVID because I thought I'm dying anyway.
Hmm.
But somehow I miraculously recover, and I can go into how I recover. But I somehow miraculously recover, and then I realized this is a miracle. And then I wanted to create the word, and but somehow it miraculously matched with my seminar series acronym. So I
Right.
don't know whether I came up with that idea or somebody gave me that name.
It all came together so powerfully. Moon, you emphasize the importance of science communication. Obviously, we just talking about the speaker series. You're
Mhm.
also a leader in both written communication through your executive editor roles at various scientific journals, for example. When you think about communicating, let's just talk about general audiences here. So beyond writing for talking to other scientists, how would you describe your approach to communicating with general audiences, with non-scientists about your work?
Sure. So before we talking about communication, all I believe this is my philosophy, all scientists and engineers or researcher should think about why we do science research or engineering. It's not because of the discovery or science itself. It's all for people. We need to put people above anything. That means we need to basically educate and convince general audience or general public in terms of what we are doing. Because at the end of the day, people decide what kind of technology we will adopt. And then that's why this is very important. So this is a very interesting question to me because as you can imagine now, I'm not native speaker, but I do strongly believe, science communication is very important, especially for the public. My approach is I try to make science enjoyable and then communication as simple as possible. In that way, they do understand. And the way I practice a lot. I used to practice a lot, but not anymore. But I practice my seminar with my now, for example, my teenage daughter. If you have the teenage daughter or son, you'd probably understand what I'm talking about.
I do.
Teenage kid, the most difficult audience to convince because they disagree with us every single point.
It's
But if
true.
I successfully convince my daughter, I'm basically successful for anybody to be convinced. So that's how I thinking about my seminar, my talk, or my written communication. I'm thinking about how to make my teenage daughter knowledgeable in some science, but that is a high school level, now college, but that is my target audience when it comes to even scientific community
Mhm.
and also, of course, the public.
Yes. And I want to touch upon two, thanks for that, Moon, two things that you talked about, and actually that we expanded on a little bit offline, which is a lot of times scientists and others are thinking about word choice and, okay, I need shorter sentences, and maybe I want to use comparisons like rhetorical devices, for example, to help with understanding. And you and I both believe big believers in the sequencing of the information also, which sometimes people don't really pay that much attention to. And people who, let's just say scientists generally, have a logical mindset, right? They want to present information in a logical way, and that can lead to a more linear way of presenting to a general audience, which might be consistent with a scientific journal where methodology may be, up front or close to the beginning. You don't get to the results till later. But when you're talking to a general audience, that sequence doesn't work very well. Can you comment a little bit about that as far as how you structure your talks? The word choice is important, yes, absolutely. And of course, the data. What about the structure?
Absolutely. So you can think about what you enjoy the most. I'm talking about even scientists. I, of course, I love science and engineering, but I probably enjoy more really great movie or music or musical, etc.
Mhm.
So when it comes to watching movie, you know how to structure the movie. You know what kind of movie is better in terms of structure. And then, but at the same time, even great movie, we don't remember every single detail. We only remember some scene or some climax. And then that is probably the way you need to structure your talk. So when it comes to my talk, I start with a big picture slide with my personal experience. And also the most important thing is, of course, storytelling rather than present gigantic amount of data. Of course, when I was junior faculty, I used to just give a talk with multiple data set to show off. And then of course the logical flow. But it's good way for writing. I'm not sure the scientific article, but that's actually sometimes or oftentimes very boring. And the other way I also implement during my seminar, I now try to make conversation, not monologue, by asking a lot of questions to the audience and also encourage them to stop me and to ask me any question anytime during my talk. Because people, become passive if they kind of hold their question at the end. But if I ask question, they start to pay attention to me. And also, if they ask the question, they engage more and then get message better because they ask the question to get information. So that is how I structure my talk. But important thing is we have too many information out there, social media and a lot of seminar series, a lot of podcasts, etc. And then people don't have time. And then when it comes to conference talk, we have the full schedule, a lot of people giving talk. I don't believe anyone remember every single detail.
All right.
The most important thing is the main message. And I sometimes even make a joke saying I give main message at the beginning. And then I said, this is it. Now you got my main message. You allowed to back to sleep or check your email. Because the people, the only thing I need to deliver is my main message. All the detail, if they are interested in, they can go back to my paper that is already published or gonna be published soon if they are interested in that one. And then the most important thing is, of course, the take-home message. And that if I deliver that one, and that's basically my goal is actually achieved.
Mhm.
And then, as I mentioned earlier, storytelling, including some behind the story. I try to give that one. In that way, you cannot find those kind of information in the literature, but making the story much more enjoyable. And that is something I almost try almost every my presentation.
And thank you for that, Moon. And I'm going to ask you about your own story because we talked a little bit offline about just thinking about communication and being in South Korea, the language, how it was taught, the challenges that you faced from a language standpoint, how you dealt with those, and now, of course, where you are. So it's from a communication standpoint, and of course, and also your research. So to me, it's a very hopeful, optimistic story, your own sort of communication journey, if you will. And it involved a lot of obstacles that many people and many scientists don't have to deal with. Of course, we do have many scientists working in the US for whom English is not their native language. And I think that if you were to share your own journey in communication, that many listeners would find that inspiring and helpful.
Sure. Let me share my shameful story. In that way, you probably more relaxed when it comes to giving a seminar or talk. You probably now realize I'm not native speaker, as I mentioned earlier. My pronunciation is sucks, and my intonation is horrible. And my daughter, she's a US citizen, correct my pronunciation and intonation all the time. And then she said, Dad, your English is bad and bad. That's basically what she told me. So going back to my embarrassing story, in Korea, our education, when I was the high school or middle school student, focused on writing and the reading, not speaking and listening. So when I become college student, that continues. We use English textbook. That means I need to understand all the written text. The exam also given in English, so that means I need to also write in English all the answers. But I didn't pay attention to the listening and the speaking because I didn't see any, need in terms of speaking and listening because in Korea very homogeneous at the time, not many foreigners in the country. Now it's completely changed. And the education also changed now. So my embarrassing story goes this way. Even in Korea, when I was college student, I'm talking about 94, around that time, we are for the first time allowed to go abroad for fun. Before we are not allowed to go abroad for fun, only for the business. And then around 94, we are allowed to go, but I'm poor undergrad student, so I couldn't go abroad. But luckily, I was selected to go abroad for the first time. And luckily, we have the professor. This is a sort of historic trip going to very unique country like Greece, Italy, Turkey, Egypt, those kind of country. You're probably not going often. Because I have a lot of other students speaking English very well, I didn't worry about too much, even though the only thing I speak is four-letter phrase, like how much is it? Thank you very much.
Right.
And that's it. That's the only and that's the only thing I need to know. And then the one embarrassing moment happened to me was in the morning in the restaurant, basically one waiter came to me and asked very simple question. I didn't understand at all, but I don't want to show I didn't understand, and I say yes. And this waiter basically took my plate, all my plate. So the question is simple: Are you done? And I didn't understand those kind of simple questions, and then I realized I need to practice or study English. But now I realize people also said, the professor or researcher also said, if you reach a certain age, that's around 16 years old or 17 years old, you cannot master other language, even though you keep practicing. And then I don't believe I could master any language, foreign language, including the English. But now I changed my mindset. Communication is not studying foreign language. Communication is basically I deliver my message to other people, and then if they understand, that's it. It doesn't necessarily need to be elegant. It doesn't necessarily need to be very difficult, using difficult vocabulary. Yes, you deliver your message, that's pretty much it. So Now I don't care how other people see me in terms of my English. I try to deliver simple message using simple vocabulary because that's the most important thing I need to do. And then that's the most important thing. And then the other thing I want to mention to other audience here, this was not overnight thing. I mean, you need to keep practicing. As I mentioned, when I was young professor, one thing I did, or even postdoc or graduate student, uh, I practiced in front of my 2 years old daughter. She doesn't understand anything, but I just speaking to her 100 times, literally.
Oh.
And then I had one huge honor that one conference, that is a first synthetic biology conference in LA, right after Professor Francis Arnold, of course, Nobel Prize winner, and now the scientific advisor of President Joe Biden. She is the one of the most powerful scientists in the world, and I giving my talk just after her keynote talk.
Mm.
And of course, I practiced literally more than 100 times, but I'm still very nervous.
Mhm.
And I typically scan people from the right to left, and then I scan, and then hoping she not paying attention to my talk or paying attention to her email, but she directly looking at me, and I was literally frozen. And this was my second embarrassing story. And then for probably 20 seconds, I couldn't say anything. And I probably screw up one of the most important conference talk. Do I
It seems,
care?
yeah, yeah,
I don't care anymore.
yeah. Yeah, and it seems to have worked out very well, nevertheless. I want to ask you as we wrap up, you have a very vibrant YouTube channel, and of course, we're going to include that link in the show notes that accompany the episodes, along with the SYNBYSS seminars that you have posted there. You also on your channel post some shorts of personal time, cooking Korean dishes and watching the sunrise with your wife, for example. And I'm wondering if you find that, as strange as this sort of sounds, but if you find that humanizing scientists is an important element of connecting with the public and perhaps countering stereotypical images of a scientist as an out of touch, aloof person you just can't relate to. Sometimes that's a framework that media uses. And the importance of sort of this idea about the need to connect before you communicate, and connecting being relatable. You're using language, of course, that's understandable, it's not complicated, and also you're just a fellow human, right? That goes and watches the sunset and sunrise and is out there as well, which can be a way to hopefully open the channel of communication with the public.
That is a very interesting observation. I'm not sure I mentioned about that one to other people or not. Absolutely right. Um, I start to use YouTube channel because again, let me go back to the why I become YouTuber. The first seminar I had with the Professor Francis Arnold and National Science Foundation director and the EBRC director and Biomed director, and also, of course, one junior faculty. And then at the time, we had several hundred people watching at the same time. And after that day, I claimed this is success, but I got more than 30 emails complaining about my seminar series. The reason was a lot of people in Asia, Australia, even Africa, India, those people complaining because the time zone difference, their time is like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 1 a.m., whatever. And then they asked me to share the video. And luckily, I recorded the video, not for releasing, but I wanted to give that video to my junior speaker because that is how I also practice my own talk. I recorded my video and then watch my video and try to change how I deliver. And then come back to your point. And then I become YouTuber after asking the permission to every speakers. And then I become YouTuber. And at one point I realized why I waste my YouTube channel only just releasing my seminar. That is only have the targeted audience. And then another reason I use my YouTube channel was my bad memory. I go somewhere. Last year I traveled more than 200 days.
Mm.
It's a lot of travel, going somewhere, some European country, Asian country. Used to take a picture, but I don't remember where I was. But if I kind of upload the YouTube video, I at least say this is Greece when, and then I can remember where I was. But at the same time, you point out very important point I actually want to achieve. My current target for the seminar series is scientific community, but I do hope some general public somehow watch my short video that's mostly about the trips or even cooking, and somehow randomly click my other video that's about scientific seminar, and then hopefully they pay a little bit attention to that scientific content. In that way, this video or this seminar series becoming free education for those kind of general public. And then that's actually one goal I want to achieve. And then some people watch my seminar series, and then that's exactly my intention to taking a lot of videos.
Wonderful. Dr. Tae Seok Moon, thank you for being on this show. Such
Sure.
a range of inspiring information, some specifics, some techniques. I know it's going to be really valuable for listeners.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. And thank you so much, for doing this kind of wonderful podcast. And this is a very important one.
I appreciate that. And listeners, thank you for being here on this episode of When Science Speaks. And I hope you'll be back next time for the next episode of When Science Speaks.